So first, let's take a quick look at how the HP 10B2 is organized. So you'll see down on the bottom right, all of the basic math functions, which replicate what a traditional financial calculator can do. These are just all of the algebraic functions that you normally see on a calculator. Then up at the top, you'll see all of the time value of money buttons, with one button for each of the 5 time value of money components. And finally, one other thing worth mentioning up front are the gold and purple keys. These are basically just shift keys that let you access additional functionality for each button. And if you take a closer look at some of the buttons on the calculator, you'll notice they have text in white, text in gold, and text in purple. The white text is the default functionality for a key, and the gold and purple text show you what the additional functionality is for those keys, which again are accessed with first pressing the gold or the purple buttons. So we'll cover several examples of how this works, but for now we just want to get familiar with how the calculator is organized. So let's run through how to use a few basic functions and settings that you'll see over and over again while using your financial calculator. We'll cover how to turn the calculator off and on, how to use the plus and the minus sign key, how to use the memory register to store values in memory, how to store and recall multiple values from memory, how to clear all registers and the difference between the clear button and the clear all function, how to change the number of decimals that are displayed, how to use the constant key, how to use the percentage key, and finally, how to use the backspace key. So first, let's take a quick look at how to turn your calculator off and on. Assuming it's already on, in order to turn it off, simply press the gold key and then the on and off key. And since the off text is in gold, once we press that gold key, that means we're now accessing that off functionality. To turn the calculator on, use the default functionality for that button by simply pressing it once, and then you'll see the calculator turns right back on. Next, the plus and minus key is something you'll use over and over again on the financial calculator, especially when it comes to time value of money problems. So if we have a number entered on the calculator, say 1,000, and we want to switch the sign of that number from a positive number to a negative number, we simply press this plus or minus key, and then you'll see that a negative sign appears in front of the number. To switch back, simply press the key again, and it'll let you toggle back and forth between positive and negative numbers. So if we want to store a single value in memory, we can use this memory register key. If, for example, we wanted to store this 1,000 number, and let's make it negative, in memory, then we simply input it on the display and then press the M register key, and now that number is stored in memory. So if we wanted to clear out the calculator and go back and recall that number, then we can simply use the recall memory key now, the RM text on the button right next to the memory register key. So once we press that, we now see we have our negative 1,000 number that we previously stored. So if we now want to store and recall multiple values in memory, which, for example, could be useful when you're storing multiple calculations along the way in order to calculate a final result, then the way you do that is with this recall and store key. So, for example, if we have a property with multiple tenants and we wanted to calculate our potential rental income, then we could say, for example, that we know the first tenant has 1,500 square feet and they pay us $12.50 a square foot. And that gets us to annual rent for that tenant of $18,750. So now we can press this gold key, then select the store key and choose a register. So we'll select the number 1. And now this number we calculated is stored in the 1 key. So if we clear out the calculator, then say we have a second tenant who occupies 2,500 square feet, and they pay us $11.35 a square foot. We can save this calculation in another register. This time we'll select the number 2. And now when we go back, we can calculate a final potential rental income for this property, assuming we only have 2 tenants, by choosing the recall button, then pressing 1 and adding that to the value stored in the second register. And that gets us our final calculation. So you can see storing and recalling multiple values from memory is something you'll probably use frequently. It's helpful when you have multiple steps along the way in a final calculation. So let's quickly cover how to clear the calculator. We've been using this C key so far, which simply clears out what's displayed on the register. So we could add a bunch of numbers together, and then we'll have some figure on this register. If we hit the clear key, then you can see it zeroes out. But what this doesn't do is clear out all of the numbers we have stored in the memory registers. So, for example, we can go back and select this RM key to recall the memory key, and we see that old value of negative 1,000 stored in memory. We can also go back and select the other memory registers that we've stored values in, and you see they're still there. And that happens whether we clear out the calculator or not. So this also applies to the time value of money functions when we're storing and recalling values from the 5 time value of money buttons. But the way you get rid of all of these values from memory is with this clear all function, which is accessed by pressing the gold key and then clear all. And that'll clear everything out from memory. And you can see now we can press that RM key. Nothing is there. We can go back and recall any of these previous registers that we've stored values in, and those are all cleared out as well. So one thing that trips a lot of people up when they first get their calculator is they're not quite sure how to change the number of decimal places. It's really easy. You just simply press the gold key, and then this display button here will allow you to select how many decibels you want. So we can change it to however many we want to see, and that'll give you as much or as little precision as you want in your calculations. I personally like to keep the calculator at 4 decimal places usually, but a lot of people prefer 2, and it just really depends on your preferences and what types of problems you're working on. So the K key, or the constant key, is sort of a time saver key. This is useful when, for example, you have some sort of percentage increase that you are applying to the same number, and rather than constantly calculating it over and over again, you can save that percentage increase in the K key. So for example, if we have the number 1,000 and we want to increase that by, say, 5%. We multiply by 1.05, hit equals. That gives us 1,050. Now, if we wanted to increase that number again by 5%, we'd have to multiply again by 1.05. And you can see this process is just like it would work on a normal calculator. But what this K key does is it gives you the ability to input your number, the same 1,000, you multiply by 1.05. And now if you hit the K key, it'll actually store that calculation in memory. And now you just have to keep hitting the equal sign, and it'll remember that you want to keep doing that same 1.05 multiplication over and over again. So if you're trying to figure out what's a lease payment going to be after 5% annual escalations for 4 years, you want to look at what those escalations are each year. This might be a useful way of saving a little bit of time along the way. So the percentage key is another time saver key. For example, if you have the number 100,000 and you want to decrease this by, say, 3.5%, you can input 3.5 and then hit that percentage key and then hit equals, and it'll automatically calculate a 3.5% decrease from that original number inputted. The same way, if you want to take that same 1,000 and simply increase it by 5%, rather than multiplying by 1.05, you can simply add 5 and then hit the percent key, and it'll give you the percentage increase. So again, just one of those time savers. A lot of people prefer not to use it. Some people prefer to use it, but this is one that a lot of people get confused on. And the final function we want to take a quick look at is the backspace key. So this is useful if, for example, you are, say, in the middle of a long calculation and you make a mistake. So what if we say, instead of 152.3587, we wanted 152.3687. Well, rather than starting all over again, simply hit the backspace key and finish inputting the correct numbers.